In the Judean desert, among the broken manuscripts recovered from Qumran, Cave 4 survives, 4Q201, an Aramaic copy of material from First Enoch written on parchment. The fragments are small, damaged, and unmistakably physical. Yet the world they preserve is filled with beings cast away from heaven, places without light, and spirits that remain on the earth after violent death. The Book of Enoch does not actually say that human beings developed a psychological fear of darkness because monsters once lived inside it. That claim goes beyond the evidence. But the text does something more precise, and perhaps more disturbing. It repeatedly connects darkness with confinement, judgment, and beings that should no longer move freely among humanity. In 1 Enoch 10, the rebellious figure Asael is bound and covered in darkness. In chapters 15 and 16, the dead giants become evil spirits whose dwelling is on the earth, where they afflict human beings. These are separate ideas in the text, but together they create a landscape in which darkness is not merely the absence of sunlight, it can mark a boundary between the ordered world and what has been condemned, imprisoned, or left wandering outside it. That leaves three problems. Did Enoch imagine these spirits as active specifically at night? Were its dark prisons earthly places, cosmic regions, or symbolic geography? And why did this imagery survive in manuscripts copied more than 2,000 years ago? The fragments give us the text. They do not yet give us the answer. That answer begins with the manuscripts themselves. The Book of Enoch was not preserved as a single ancient volume waiting intact in one cave. At Qumran, portions of several Enochic compositions survived in Aramaic among the Dead Sea Scrolls, especially from Cave 4. Fragments cataloged as 4Q201 through 4Q21. Two preserve parts of works now contained within 1st Enoch, including the Book of the Watchers, the Astronomical Book, the Dream Visions, and the Epistle of Enoch. This matters because the darkness imagery is not known only from a much later translation. The Qumran fragments show that Enochic traditions were already circulating in Jewish communities during the Second Temple period. The surviving Aramaic manuscripts are fragmentary, while the only complete form of 1st Enoch survives in Gate, preserved within the Ethiopian Christian tradition. Greek fragments also survive, providing another line of comparison between textual forms. The section most relevant to the fallen beings begins in 1 Enoch 6 through 16. There, the Watchers descend, take human wives, and produce giants. Their violence brings judgment. In chapter 10, Asael is ordered bound in a rough and dark place until the final judgment. Later, chapters 15 and 16 describe the spirits proceeding from the dead giants as evil spirits remaining upon the earth. But careful wording is essential. The text does not present a scientific theory of why humans fear darkness, and it does not say that every dark place contains spirits. Instead, darkness functions inside a larger moral and cosmic geography. It is associated with punishment, exclusion, and separation from the ordered heavens. And one textual fact sharpens the mystery. Because the geography of judgment is more complicated than a simple night world, Enoch does not place every dangerous being in the same kind of darkness. That distinction becomes visible when Enoch is taken through the strange geography of the fallen world. In 1 Enoch 17 through 19, he is shown remote regions at the edges of creation, places associated with fire, darkness, imprisonment, and rebellious heavenly beings. The text describes these locations as part of a cosmic order. They are not ordinary caves or night landscapes presented as archaeological sites. Then, in chapter 21, the imagery becomes even more concentrated. Enoch sees a place described as chaotic and terrifying, with neither the ordered structure of heaven nor the stability of earth. There, stars are confined like prisoners. His angelic guide explains that these are heavenly beings being held because of transgression. Darkness here is not simply what happens after sunset. It is part of punishment itself, a condition of separation. But the spirits of the dead giants are described differently. In 1 Enoch 15 and 16, they are not portrayed as locked inside those cosmic prisons. The text states that the spirits arising from the giants will remain upon the earth, afflicting, oppressing, attacking, and causing destruction until the great judgment. This distinction matters. The rebellious watchers can be bound. Their offspring can die. Yet the spirits proceeding from those dead giants continue in the human world. Some scholars interpret this passage as an ancient explanation for hostile spirits or demons within a Second Temple Jewish framework. It provides an origin story for invisible agents of suffering without saying that darkness created them or that darkness itself is alive. Still, imagine how the narrative functions. Above, ordered heavens; below, the inhabited earth; beyond or beneath that order, prisons of darkness; and moving across the human realm, spirits whose physical bodies are gone. The text creates fear through boundaries. The most dangerous beings are dangerous because they have crossed them. That may help explain why later readers could associate night, wilderness, ruins, and unseen spaces with spiritual danger. But the Book of Enoch itself does not reduce the mystery to darkness alone. The more difficult question is why its wandering spirits were allowed to remain here at all. The reason becomes clear when the judgment narrative separates the fate of the watchers from the fate of their children. In 1 Enoch 10, the rebellious heavenly beings are restrained. Asael is bound and cast into a desolate place, while other watchers are confined until the day of judgment. Their punishment is spatial. They are removed from ordinary movement and placed under restriction. But the giants create a different problem. According to 1 Enoch 15:8 through 16:1, the giants were born from the union of spirits and flesh. When their bodies die, the text says that spirits proceed from them and remain upon the earth. They are described as evil spirits because their origin does not fit the proper order of creation. Their bodies belong to the earth. Their paternal origin was heavenly. After death, the resulting spirits belong fully to neither realm. That is the deeper logic of the passage. The text does not say these spirits are strongest at midnight. It does not say they hide in every cave, forest, or darkened room. Instead, it presents them as dislocated beings, surviving because the hybrid existence that produced them has ended badly. Their violence continues after their bodies are gone. This makes darkness more significant, but in a different way than the title might first suggest. In Enochic literature, darkness often marks exclusion, confinement, or the edge of ordered creation. The giant spirits, however, are frightening precisely because they are not safely confined there. They remain in the human sphere. That creates an inversion. Darkness can be the place where dangerous beings are imprisoned, while the earth itself becomes the place where other dangerous beings still wander. For an ancient audience, the terror is not simply that something lives in the dark. It is that cosmic rebellion has left consequences inside the human world. And one surviving detail makes that consequence even more unsettling. The language used for these spirits overlaps with later Jewish and Christian ways of speaking about demons. But the relationship is not as simple as direct inheritance. One small phrase controls much of that connection. In 1 Enoch 15, the beings produced after the giants die are not merely called ghosts. The text distinguishes between spirits associated with heaven and spirits whose origin is tied to the earth. The dead giants become what translations commonly render as evil spirits, beings whose identity is explained by where they came from and what kind of existence produced them. That wording matters because it prevents a simple reading in which every disembodied being is automatically the same kind of entity. The passage builds a hierarchy. Heavenly spirits properly belong to heaven. Human beings belong to the earth. The giants, however, emerged from an illicit crossing of those categories. Their post-mortem spirits therefore occupy an abnormal position. Some scholars understand this as one strand in the development of Jewish demonology, although the surviving evidence does not establish a single straight line from Enoch to every later Jewish or Christian concept of demons. The translation problem makes the issue sharper. Different modern versions may render the relevant terms with slightly different English words, but the larger distinction remains: these spirits are dangerous because they are the residue of a violated cosmic boundary. That changes how the darkness imagery works. Darkness is not the creature. Darkness is the condition surrounding exclusion, punishment, and disordered space. The wandering spirits are frightening for a different reason. They are evidence, within the narrative, that something forbidden crossed into the human world and left consequences that could no longer be contained by physical death. And once that distinction is visible, another question appears: can the physical manuscripts themselves tell us how early this demonology was already taking shape? The manuscripts answer that question without proving the supernatural claims they preserve. Modern paleography and textual criticism can examine when a fragment was copied, what language it uses, and how its wording relates to other surviving witnesses. They cannot determine whether the beings described in the text actually existed. That distinction is crucial. At Qumran, the Aramaic Enoch manuscripts show that traditions about the Watchers, giants, judgment, and hostile spirits were circulating in Jewish contexts centuries before the complete Ge'ez manuscripts through which 1st Enoch is known today. Scholars compare handwriting styles, fragment joins, linguistic forms, and overlapping passages to reconstruct portions of works that survive only incompletely in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Modern multispectral imaging has also transformed the study of ancient manuscripts more broadly. By photographing fragments under different wavelengths of light, researchers can sometimes recover traces of ink that are difficult to distinguish from darkened or damaged writing surfaces. This technique does not reveal hidden doctrines. It makes faint writing more legible. For Enochic material, the value is methodological. A damaged line can affect how confidently a passage is reconstructed. A clear letter can strengthen one reading and weaken another. But even an improved reading remains textual evidence, not archaeological confirmation of angels, giants, or demons. The physical fragments therefore establish something narrower and historically important. Enochic demonology was not invented by medieval copyists. Portions of these traditions existed in manuscript form in the Second Temple period. That helps scholars trace how ideas about rebellious heavenly beings and evil spirits developed within ancient Jewish literature. The parallel with later demon language is real at the level of vocabulary and concepts, but similarity does not by itself prove a direct line of transmission, and that leaves the investigation in an uncomfortable position. The manuscripts can show that these ideas are ancient. They can sometimes show how the wording changed. They can even reveal where later translations preserve older material. But they cannot tell us why darkness became such a powerful human symbol of unseen threat, or whether Enoch was reflecting a wider fear already present around it. That wider fear did not remain confined to one manuscript tradition. In the centuries after the Enochic works were composed, Jewish and Christian communities did not treat them in exactly the same way. Some preserved the traditions, some cited them, some echoed their language, and others transmitted different explanations for evil spirits without making 1st Enoch part of their scriptural canon. The clearest Christian example appears in the letter of Jude. Jude 14 and 15 explicitly attributes a prophecy to Enoch, the seventh from Adam, using wording closely related to 1st Enoch 1:9. That does not mean every early Christian community accepted the entire Book of Enoch as scripture. It does show that Enochic material could circulate with authority in at least some early Christian settings. Other writers knew the tradition as well. Tertullian, writing in the late 2nd and early 3rd centuries, defended the usefulness of Enoch, even while acknowledging that not everyone received it. Origen was familiar with Enochic material, but also recognized disputes over its status. These disagreements are important because they reveal reception, not a single moment of removal. In most later Jewish and Christian canons, 1st Enoch was not included. The evidence does not support the popular claim that a council such as Nicaea suddenly erased it from the Bible. Canon formation was gradual, regional, and uneven. Yet in Ethiopia, the story developed differently. The complete work survived in Ge'ez and became part of the broader Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo biblical tradition. That preservation is one reason the book could later return to wider scholarly attention in Europe. So the history of Enoch is not a story of one institution hiding a dangerous text. It is a story of competing boundaries, which books were copied, which were quoted, which were translated, and which communities continued to treat them as sacred. The irony is difficult to miss. A book obsessed with beings crossing forbidden boundaries survived because human communities kept drawing new boundaries around the book itself. And that historical conflict leaves one final problem. How much of the Enoch we read today can be securely connected to the ancient fragments? And where does the surviving evidence still break apart? The break appears most clearly when scholars compare the complete Ge'ez text with the fragmentary Aramaic remains from Qumran. Large portions of 1st Enoch have no surviving Aramaic manuscript witness at all. Other passages survive only as scraps containing a few lines or isolated words. That means some sections can be checked directly against ancient fragments, while others depend on later transmission. This does not make the Ge'ez text unreliable by definition. It means the evidence is uneven. For the Watcher's material, enough Aramaic survives to confirm that key elements of the story are ancient, the descent of heavenly beings, their transgression, the giants, and divine judgment. But the surviving fragments are damaged and incomplete, and not every sentence in modern editions can be matched to a Qumran fragment. Scholars therefore work with overlapping witnesses, including Aramaic fragments, Greek remains, and the complete Ethiopic tradition. The unresolved problem is especially important when viewers encounter precise claims online about what the Dead Sea Scrolls say. A modern translation of 1st Enoch may contain a passage preserved only in Ge'ez or Greek, while the corresponding Aramaic wording is missing. A statement can belong authentically to 1st Enoch without surviving in a Dead Sea Scroll fragment. That difference is easy to lose. It also limits what physical evidence can settle. Manuscripts can demonstrate that Enochic traditions existed in antiquity. They can reveal textual variation and transmission. They cannot restore every lost line with certainty. So when the book speaks of darkness, imprisoned watchers, and spirits roaming the earth, the broad tradition is ancient, but the exact wording is not equally secure everywhere. And one question remains open at the edge of the fragments, which details belong to the earliest recoverable form of the tradition, and which reached us only through centuries of copying. Now, an important distinction is necessary. The physical evidence does not prove that watchers descended from heaven, that giants once walked the earth, or that disembodied spirits still move through darkness. What the physical evidence proves is more limited manuscripts containing Enochic traditions were copied in antiquity, including Aramaic fragments from Qumran. The textual evidence then tells us what those ancient compositions claimed. Interpretation begins only after that point. The text states that rebellious heavenly beings crossed a forbidden boundary, that their offspring became giants, and that after the giants died, evil spirits remained upon the earth. Elsewhere, darkness accompanies imprisonment, judgment, and regions separated from the ordered cosmos. Those ideas can be placed beside one another, but the text never gives us a sentence saying human beings fear darkness because these spirits once lived there. That connection is an interpretation. If the Watcher's story preserves an ancient attempt to explain the origin of destructive spirits, and if darkness in Enochic geography marks exclusion, confinement, and the loss of cosmic order, then the larger question becomes whether later fears of unseen beings in night, wilderness, and ruined places drew partly from the same symbolic world. The evidence allows the question, it does not settle it. Even the word demonology must be handled carefully. Modern scholars use it to describe traditions concerning hostile spirits, but ancient Jewish texts did not all organize those beings in the same way. 1st Enoch offers one influential framework among several. Later, Jewish and Christian traditions developed their own vocabularies, hierarchies, and explanations. So the strongest conclusion is narrower, but more secure. More than 2,000 years ago, Jewish authors were already imagining a cosmos in which darkness could signify punishment and separation, while dangerous spirits remained active within the human realm. The fear comes not from darkness itself, but from uncertainty about what lies beyond visible order. And because the manuscripts survive only in fragments at precisely the places where certainty matters most, the final implication cannot be separated from the physical evidence that began this investigation: broken parchment, missing lines, and a story whose darkest spaces remain partly unreadable. Back in the Judean desert, the fragments from Qumran Cave 4 remain as they were when this investigation began: damaged pieces of parchment carrying ancient Aramaic words. They do not preserve a memory of monsters hiding in the night. They do not prove that human fear of darkness began with the Watchers, giants, or spirits described in First Enoch. What they preserve is something more restrained. More than 2,000 years ago, Jewish scribes copied traditions in which rebellion in heaven damaged the human world. Darkness marked punishment and separation, and hostile spirits were imagined as remaining on earth after the bodies that produced them had died. The manuscripts still exist. The broken edges are still visible. The missing lines are still missing. That incompleteness matters, because the mystery of darkness in Enoch is not solved by turning symbolism into archaeology or theology into scientific fact. Its power lies in the boundary the text creates between what can be seen and what must be inferred. The fragments tell us that ancient people told this story. They cannot tell us why the story felt true enough to preserve. So when the light disappears, are we afraid of darkness itself, or of the ancient possibility that darkness is where order stops?